A city that shouldn't exist. At some point in your life, you've looked at a map and trusted it without thinking. Borders, coastlines, rivers, roads, it all feels permanent. But maps can lie. Not always because someone draws them wrong. Sometimes because what they are supposed to show is no longer there. Imagine standing in a quiet field. No skyline. No traffic. No signposts. Just wind moving through dry grass. Now imagine that beneath your feet, under a thin layer of soil, there are streets. Not dirt paths. Streets. Stone foundations. Homes. Workshops. Temples. A city laid out with purpose, with engineering, with rules. A place where people ate, argued, loved, built families, buried their dead, and believed their world would last forever. And yet today, it's gone. Not ruined. Not abandoned. Gone, as if the planet tried to hide it. Some vanished under ash. Some under sand. Some under water. Some were swallowed by the jungle so completely that for centuries, nobody even knew where to look. These aren't legends. They're real cities, real civilizations confirmed by stone, metal, bones, and the accidental discoveries of people who weren't even searching. This is part 1 of Lost Civilizations, cities erased from the map. And the stories you're about to hear have one thing in common. Each city was once powerful enough to shape its region, and then, somehow, it slipped out of human memory. Let's begin. One Pompeii, the city frozen in its last breath. When people talk about the lost cities, Pompeii is one of the first names that comes up. But calling Pompeii lost doesn't capture what makes it terrifying. Pompeii didn't simply disappear. It died in public, and then it was sealed like a time capsule. In the year 79 CE, Pompeii was a thriving Roman city near the Bay of Naples. It had markets, bathhouses, temples, taverns, villas painted with bright frescoes, and graffiti scratched into walls, messages so casual they feel modern. People wrote jokes, insults, advertisements, love notes, promises. Pompeii was alive, and above it, looming like a silent god, was Mount Vesuvius. For years, Vesuvius gave warning, small earthquakes, subtle tremors. But when you live with a monster long enough, you stop noticing its breathing. Then, one day, the mountain erupted. At first, ash fell like strange snow. Some people ran. Some stayed thinking it would pass. They were used to earthquakes. They were used to disruption. But this was not disruption. This was nature rewriting the rules. A towering column of ash and gas rose into the sky. Rocks rained down. Roofs collapsed. The air turned black. Visibility vanished. And then came what truly ended Pompeii, pyroclastic flows. These were not lava rivers you could outrun. They were superheated avalanches of gas, ash, and debris moving with the speed of a storm and the heat of an oven. When they hit the city, life stopped instantly. People were caught mid-step, mid-scream, mid-prayer. Over time, ash buried everything. Not just the buildings, the evidence of daily life. For centuries, Pompeii vanished from the living world. Not a tourist spot, not a ruin, just a ghost under the ground. And then it was found again slowly by accident and then by excavation. What archaeologists uncovered wasn't just architecture. It was a full snapshot of a civilization at the exact second it didn't know it was ending. Bread still in ovens, tools left on tables, wall paintings intact, and the most haunting, empty spaces in ash where bodies had decomposed. When those voids were filled with plaster, the shapes of people returned, frozen in fear, cold in final instincts holding children, covering faces. Pompeii's story is often told as tragedy, but it's also a warning about the arrogance of permanence. Because Pompeii looked stable, it looked civilized, it looked unstoppable. And then, in a single day, it became a lost city. But Pompeii is only the beginning, because some cities didn't leave behind obvious mountains or dramatic eruptions. Some were swallowed so quietly that history almost forgot them. To Angkor, the megacity the jungle tried to eat. If you could time travel and fly over Cambodia 1,000 years ago, you would see something almost impossible. A city so vast and organized it would challenge the idea that ancient means primitive. That city was Angkor, the heart of the Khmer Empire. Most people know Angkor for one famous temple, Angkor Wat, massive stone towers, detailed carvings, long galleries, symmetrical courtyards. But Angkor wasn't just a temple complex. It was a living urban system. For a long time, historians underestimated it. They thought the temples were isolated monuments, religious centers surrounded by forest. Then modern technology revealed the truth. Using aerial surveys and advanced scanning methods, researchers began to see patterns in the landscape. Lines, quartz embankments, canals, and roads. Angkor wasn't a small city. It was a megacity, an enormous network of human settlement connected by one of the most ambitious water management systems in the ancient world. Water was Angkor's secret weapon. The Khmer engineered vast reservoirs, canals, and moats. They controlled seasonal flooding and stored water for dry months. They turned the environment into infrastructure. In many ways, Angkor wasn't merely built on the land. It was built with the land. And when a civilization ties its survival to a complex system, it also creates a complex vulnerability. Because once that system becomes unstable, everything becomes unstable. So what happened? There wasn't one single disaster. There wasn't one clear enemy that arrived and destroyed it. Angkor's decline appears to be a slow unraveling, a mix of environmental pressure, political shifts, and system failure. Evidence suggests periods of extreme drought followed by intense monsoon flooding. A water network designed to handle predictable seasons may have struggled under unpredictable extremes. Channels clogged, reservoirs failed, farmland suffered, trade routes and power centers shifted. Over time, the population moved. The stone temples remained too big to carry away, too sacred to demolish, but the city around them faded. And then the jungle moved in. Trees pushed roots into cracks. Vines wrapped around carved gods. Leaves covered roads. Within a few centuries, Angkor transformed from a megacity into a myth. Local people still knew it was there, of course, but to the outside world, it became a lost city, a forgotten crown hidden under green silence. Angkor teaches a different lesson than Pompeii. Pompeii died fast. Angkor died slowly. One was destruction. The other was decay. And in some ways, the slow deaths are more frightening, because you don't notice them until you're already living inside the collapse. But if Angkor vanished into the jungle, our next city vanished into something even more relentless. The sea. 3 Heraclean Donis, the Egyptian port swallowed by the ocean. There are places that disappear so completely that people argue whether they were ever real. For ancient Egypt, one such place was Heraclean, also known as Thonis. For centuries, Heraclean existed in texts and scattered references, whispers, in the historical record. It was described as a major port city near the mouth of the Nile, a place of trade, temples, and wealth connected to both Egyptian and Greek worlds. But no one could find it. No ruins, no clear location, no obvious remains. It became one of those names that hangs between history and legend. And then, in the late 20th century, underwater archaeologists began scanning the seabed off the coast of Egypt. What they found changed everything. Beneath the Mediterranean, under layers of silt and sand, were massive stone blocks. Statues taller than a human. Columns. Temple remains. Stelae carved with inscriptions. They had discovered a sunken city. Heracleum wasn't a myth. It was real. It was enormous. And it was down there, in the dark. So how does a city end up underwater? Heraclean's fate appears connected to geological instability. The Nile Delta is made of soft sediment. Over centuries, that ground can shift, settle, liquefy, especially during earthquakes and floods. Imagine a city built on land that is slowly losing its grip. Buildings crack, foundations weaken. Then a severe event hits: earthquake, storm surge, tsunami-like waves, relentless flooding. The ground liquefies, turning solid earth into something like quicksand. Structures collapse, tilt, sink. Water rushes in, and over time, the sea claims what remains. Heraclean statues fell like giants in slow motion. Temples collapsed into the mud. Streets dissolved into the seabed. The ocean doesn't just destroy, it preserves. Underwater, objects are sealed away from sunlight and human scavenging. So when archaeologists found Heraclean, they found it still carrying pieces of its identity: coins, jewelry, anchors, ritual objects. The city had been erased from maps, but not erased from existence. It had simply moved from land into water, and that raises a disturbing thought. How many other cities are gone not because they were destroyed, but because the planet changed shape around them? How many legends are simply places we haven't located yet? In every era, humans build as if the earth is stable, as if the ground is a promise. But the ground is not a promise. It is a temporary agreement for a different kind of disappearance. So far, we've seen cities erased by ash, by jungle, and by sea. But there's another force that can erase a civilization even more thoroughly. Silence. Not sudden disaster. Not one dramatic event. Just the people leaving. Not all cities die violently. Some die when trade routes shift, when rivers change course, when resources run out, when politics fracture, when a new capital rises somewhere else. History often remembers conquerors and emperors, but it forgets ordinary cities that were simply outlived. That's what makes lost civilizations so fascinating, because what we call lost is often just unrecorded, or unnoticed, or buried before anyone wrote it down. And once a city falls out of human memory, it doesn't need an enemy to vanish. Time is enough. 5 what these cities have in common. Pompeii, Angkor, Heraclea, 3 different worlds, 3 different endings. But they share something essential. They were all advanced in ways that people believed would last. They had systems, culture, craftsmanship, organization. And then the world didn't care. Ash doesn't care about art. Jungle doesn't care about engineering. The sea doesn't care about temples. Civilization is fragile not because humans are incapable, but because the environment is always bigger than the plan. And yet, humans keep building. We build near volcanoes because the soil is fertile. We build on deltas because trade is easy. We build megasystems because they make life efficient. And each time, we bet against nature. Sometimes we win for centuries. Sometimes we lose overnight. But there are lost cities even more mysterious than these. Cities that were not preserved as neatly as Pompeii, not visible as magnificently as Angkor, not resting like statues under the sea. Cities that existed long before our modern timeline of history even begins. Cities that force us to ask a hard question. What if the ancient world was bigger, older, and more complex than we assume? That's where part 2 goes next. Deeper into places that were once dismissed as myths, until archaeology proved otherwise. Because in part 2, we'll talk about cities that remained invisible for thousands of years, hidden under desert and stone, waiting for someone to look at the ground and realize a civilization can vanish, but it never disappears without leaving something behind. The places we call myth. There's a pattern in human history that repeats like a curse. A traveller reports a city no one else has seen. A text mentions a kingdom with impossible wealth. A legend describes stone streets, towers, canals, or temples, then ends with a warning. Now it is gone. For centuries, those stories are treated as exaggeration, or propaganda, or folklore meant to entertain. But then someone digs, or scans the earth from the sky, or dives beneath the sea, and suddenly the myth becomes a coordinate. In part 1, we saw cities erased by ash, jungle, and ocean. In part 2, we go deep into cities that were once dismissed as fantasy, until evidence forced the world to admit something unsettling. We have underestimated the ancient world. These are not just ruins. They are missing chapters of civilization, chapters that weren't forgotten by accident, but buried by time, climate, and the limits of what humans could record. Let's continue. One Troy, a city found under its own legend. For a long time, Troy was not a place. It was a story, a war of heroes, a wooden horse, a city that fell because pride blinded its gates. The Iliad made Troy famous, but also made it suspicious. Poetry is not a map, so scholars argued for centuries. Was Troy real, or was it just a stage invented for epic drama? Then, in the 19th century, an obsessive search began, driven by the belief that if the story was powerful enough to survive, it might be rooted in something true. Near the Dardanelles in modern-day Turkey, excavations uncovered ruins at a site called Hisarlik. stone walls, foundations, layers upon layers of settlement. And here's where Troy becomes more than a fan city, because Troy wasn't one city, it was many. The same hill had been occupied, rebuilt, destroyed, and rebuilt again, like history repeating in stone. Archaeologists identified multiple layers, different eras stacked like pages. Some layers show signs of fire, some show hard construction, some show wealth and trade, suggesting a city connected to major routes. This is what time does to a city. It compresses it. From above, ruins can look simple, but below, civilizations pile up. So when we ask, did Troy exist, the more honest question becomes, which Troy? The Troy of myth might be a memory of a real conflict, distorted through retelling, amplified into legend, but anchored in a place that genuinely mattered. And if Troy could hide for centuries beneath poetry, what else have we mistaken for fiction? To Mohenjo-Daro, the ancient city with modern rules. Now let's travel further back, to a civilization that feels almost alien, because it looks advanced in a way we're not used to seeing in deep antiquity. The Indus Valley civilization. One of its greatest cities was Mohenjo-Daro, located in what is now Pakistan. When Mohenjo-Daro was uncovered, people were stunned, not by gold, not by statues of kings, but by something far more revealing: order. This city was planned. Streets were laid out in grids. Buildings were constructed with standardized bricks. Homes had access to drainage systems. There were wells, bathrooms, and channels that carried wastewater away. In other words, Mohenjo-Daro did something that even many later civilizations struggled to do. It treated sanitation like infrastructure. This is not what we expect from a city that flourished thousands of years ago. And yet, it was real. So why did it disappear? That's where the mystery begins. Unlike Pompeii, there is no single clear apocalypse. No giant explosion frozen in a moment. Mohenjo-Daro appears to have declined through a combination of forces: shifts in rivers, environmental changes, economic disruption, possibly floods, possibly social transformation. The Indus region's waterways were the lifelines of the civilization. If rivers change course, cities can starve, not immediately, but steadily. And there's another haunting element. We still cannot fully read their script. The Indus people left symbols, short inscriptions on seals and objects, but without a confirmed translation. Their political structure, their beliefs, their internal history remain partly sealed. It's like finding a modern city in ruins, with street signs you can't read, records you can't decode, and no surviving voice to explain what happened. Mohenjo-Daro teaches us that civilization can be brilliant, organized, and widespread, and still vanish without leaving a clear narrative. Sometimes, the ruins survive better than the memory. Srinathmado, the Venice built on the sea. There's a place in the Pacific that looks like it was designed by someone who refused to accept reality. A city built not on land, but on artificial islands of stone, connected by canals. This place is Namado, near the island of Pompeii in Micronesia. From above, it resembles a maze, rectangular enclosures, waterways, walls made of stacked basalt columns. Basalt is heavy. Moving it is difficult even with modern equipment. So the first question Namado raises is simple. How did an island society move and stack massive stones to create an entire city on the ocean? Namado appears to have been a ceremonial and political center, a seat of power linked to local dynasties, a place where elites lived and rituals occurred. But it wasn't a city in the Roman sense. It was a specialized center, a constructed environment designed for authority. And then it faded. Why? Part of the explanation may be the same as many erased places: a fragile system. When a city depends on complex organization, moving food, resources, and people into a difficult space, any disruption can collapse it. Changes in political power, conflicts, resource strain, shifts in society. Namado wasn't swallowed by ash. It wasn't buried under sand. It simply stopped being maintained. And in the tropics, when humans stop maintaining stone and canal systems, nature reclaims them fast. Vegetation creeps in. Salt air erodes. The sea eats the edges. Namado became a place people remembered with fear. A forbidden city associated with spirits and old rulers. That fear can preserve a ruin better than walls do, because when people avoid a place, they stop rebuilding on top of it. Namado is a reminder that lost cities aren't always lost because they were destroyed. Sometimes they are lost because they became untouchable, socially, politically, spiritually. For Great Zimbabwe, the stone city Europe refused to believe. Deep in southern Africa stands a complex of stone ruins that should have ended an argument long ago. Massive walls, precision stonework, a layout that suggests planning and power. This is Great Zimbabwe. For centuries, outsiders struggled with an uncomfortable idea that an advanced, stone-built city could have been created by African societies without external civilizing forces. So people invented explanations. Foreign builders, lost Europeans, mythical outsiders. Not because evidence demanded it, but because bias did. But the truth is simpler and stronger. Great Zimbabwe was built by the ancestors of local African peoples. It was the center of a powerful society connected to trade networks, including gold and other goods moving across the region. Its stone walls were not random piles. They were engineering. So why did it decline? Likely a mix of resource pressure and shifting trade routes. Cities rise on trade and stability. They fall when that balance breaks. If the surrounding environment is overused, wood, farmland, grazing, the system can weaken. If trade networks shift away, wealth drains. Over time, power relocates. Great Zimbabwe wasn't erased in a single night. It was outgrown and left behind. And then history tried to erase it again, not through nature, but through narrative. That's another way civilizations disappear, when later storytellers refuse to acknowledge them. 5 erased doesn't always mean destroyed. At this point, you might notice something important. Not one of these cities is gone in the way people imagine. They are not deleted from reality. They are deleted from attention. A city can be erased by volcanoes, but it can also be erased by a river changing course, a trade route shifting, a political center moving, a belief system collapsing, a population dispersing, or an entire history being miswritten. When we say lost civilizations, we often picture mystery as if it's supernatural, but the real mystery is human. How could millions of lives leave behind so little that later generations forgot them? The answer is that memory is fragile. Writing is rare. Records burn. Languages die. And the people who replace you don't always care to preserve your name. Sometimes they build on your ruins. Sometimes they avoid them. Sometimes they steal the stones. Sometimes they tell a different story. And sometimes they don't even know you existed. 6. A question that haunts archaeology. Every lost city leaves behind 2 stories. The story of how it lived, and the story of how it disappeared. We love the disappearance because it feels dramatic. But the deeper story is the one we rarely have. How did these civilizations sustain themselves? How did they organize later? Power, belief. Because if a city like Mohenjo-Daro could run sanitation systems thousands of years ago, then the progress line we imagine primitive to advanced gets messy. If Namado could build a stone labyrinth on water, then we have to rethink what small societies could achieve. If Troy is layered like a stack of worlds, then we have to accept that many famous single events are really the compression of centuries. And if Great Zimbabwe was doubted not because of evidence, but because of prejudice, then we have to ask, how many other civilizations have been minimized, mislabeled, or ignored? The past isn't just buried, it's filtered. The deepest layers of human memory. By now, you've seen how a city can vanish. A volcano can seal it. A jungle can swallow it. The ocean can drown it. A river can abandon it. A trade route can bypass it. But there's another kind of disappearance. The most disturbing one, because it doesn't just erase a city. It erases a timeline. There are places on Earth that shouldn't exist according to the old story we told ourselves about civilization. Places that are too organized, too monumental, too early. Because if humans were just hunter-gatherers at the dawn of history, Then how do you explain massive stone constructions before agriculture fully takes over? If the first cities were supposed to appear in one neat region and one neat era, then why do we keep finding urban centres rising independently across continents at different times, sometimes earlier than expected? Part 3 is where lost civilizations stop being a collection of tragedies and start becoming a challenge. A challenge to what we think we know about how a civilization begins, how it spreads, and how easily it can be erased. Let's go to the oldest shadows. One Göbekli Tepe, the temple that came before the city. In southeastern Turkey, there is a hill that looked ordinary for most of modern history. No towering ruins. No visible walls. Just earth and stones in a landscape that has seen thousands of years of human movement. Then excavations revealed something that forced historians to pause. Massive stone pillars, T-shaped monoliths arranged in circles. Carved with animals, foxes, snakes, boars, birds. Crafted with intention, symbolism, and scale. This place is Göbekli Tepe, and what makes it extraordinary is not only its design, it's its age. Göbekli Tepe dates back to a time when conventional narratives say humans had not yet built monumental religious architecture. A time when people are often described as scattered groups, living light on the land. And yet here is a site that required organization, skilled labor, planning, and a shared purpose strong enough to bring people together repeatedly. Göbekli Tepe is not a city. It is not a palace. It appears to be a ceremonial center, something like a gathering point, a sacred place, a social engine. And that is exactly why it matters. Because it suggests something profound. What if belief came first? What if shared ritual and identity pull people into larger groups? And those larger groups eventually needed stable food supplies, and that pressure helped drive agriculture. In that version of history, the temple is not a result of civilization. It's a cause. And then there's the strangest part. Göbekli Tepe was intentionally buried, not destroyed by invaders, not crushed by an earthquake. Buried, layered with soil and debris, as if the people who used it decided to close it, to seal it, to hide it. That raises questions with no easy answers. Did their beliefs change? Did the site become taboo? Did a new power replace an old one? Was it an act of preservation, like locking a door? Whatever the reason, it worked. Göbekli Tepe became invisible, a lost monument in plain sight, until the modern world dug it back into existence. If part 1 showed nature erasing cities, Göbekli Tepe shows humans erasing their own sacred past. And once you accept that, you start to wonder, how many other sites did people bury, abandon, or seal, and never return to? Çatalhöyük, when city didn't look like a city. When most people picture an ancient city, they imagine streets, gates, and public squares. But some of the earliest dense settlements didn't look like that at all. They looked like a living block of architecture, a honeycomb of homes pressed together. This is Çatalhöyük, also in modern Turkey. From above, it resembles a mound, a hill formed by layers of human habitation built, collapsed, rebuilt, and built again. But what was found inside is what changes everything. Çatalhöyük had houses packed wall to wall, with no streets in between. People moved across rooftops and entered their homes from above. Inside those homes were wall paintings, carefully placed platforms, aerials beneath floors, and evidence of rituals woven into daily life. This was not primitive. This was complex social behavior. The city, if we can call it that, was not organized around kings and palaces. It was organized around households, community, and shared norms. And then, over time, it declined. Not with fire raining from the sky, but gradually through shifts in environment, resources, and social structure. Çatalhöyük reminds us that civilization is not one design. There isn't a single blueprint. Human beings have invented multiple ways to live densely, to cooperate, to create art, and to build meaning. So when one of those forms disappears, we should not assume it was inferior. It may simply have been fragile in a changing world. Carol, the America's ancient city of stone and wind. Now let's cross the planet, far from the usual cradle of civilization's story. Along the arid coast of Peru, there is a place that looks like geometry rising out of desert. Terrace mounds, stone platforms, large structures aligned with intention. This is Carol, part of the Norchico civilization, one of the earliest known complex societies in the Americas. Carol challenges another outdated assumption, that monumental civilization began only in a few classical regions and spread outward. Carol suggests independent development, its own path, its own timeline. It existed in a harsh environment where water and agriculture required coordination, where survival meant planning. And what's striking about Carol is what's missing from the narrative we expect. There is little evidence of fortifications, no obvious signs of constant warfare in the earliest phases. Instead, the city appears to have been driven by trade, ceremony, and social coordination, and yet it too declined. Climate shifts, environmental stress, the delicate balance between land and water. Carol is proof that cities can rise early and vanish early, leaving behind stone shapes that later cultures may not even recognize as urban. When a place is erased early enough, it doesn't become ruins. It becomes a puzzle, for the story people want and the story evidence allows. Whenever lost civilizations are discussed, there's always one name waiting in the background. Atlantis. The idea of a perfect city swallowed by the sea is irresistible. It feels like a clean myth, bright punishment, disappearance. But here's what's important. You don't need Atlantis to have real lost cities. We already have them. Pompeii was sealed. Heraclean sank. Angkor was consumed by jungle. And countless others are still hidden beneath deserts, forests, and coastlines. The difference is this: myths offer a complete story. Real archaeology offers incomplete evidence. Myths feel satisfying. Reality is messer. But reality is also more powerful, because it proves something deeper than any legend. Human civilization has been rising and falling for a very long time, and we have not discovered all of it. And that means some of what sounds like legend might be distorted memory, not of one magical city, but of many real collapses told through generations. When coastlines change, people remember floods. When cities sink, people remember drowning. When societies vanish, survivors create explanations. The myth is the emotional fossil. The ruins are the physical fossil. Both matter, but only one can be excavated. 5-hour civilization disappears without a single end. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most civilizations do not end with a cinematic final scene. They don't collapse like a building. They fade like a language. A civilization can disappear through a chain reaction. Climate becomes unstable. Crops fail more often. Social tensions rise. People move away from the center. Trade networks break. Power fragments. A city becomes too expensive to maintain. The next generation is born somewhere else. Then, one day, the old city is no longer home. It's just a place. A place you pass. A place you avoid. A place you forget. And once a city is forgotten, nature doesn't need permission. It moves in. 6. The final question: what are we losing right now? Lost civilizations feel distant, but they shouldn't. Because the same forces that erased ancient cities still exist. Rising seas, extreme storms, drought, earthquakes, volcanic activity, resource pressure, political instability, economic shifts. Modern cities look permanent, until they're not. And there's another kind of erasure we rarely talk about: digital erasure. Most of our records are stored on fragile system servers, drives, clouds. We assume it will last forever because it feels infinite. The future archaeologists might dig up our concrete and steel and find silence. No inscriptions, no tablets, no stone-carved histories, just structures and debris. Imagine a future where our era is a broken layer, a thin band of plastic, metal, and collapse. And the story of who we were is missing, because the storage didn't survive. That's what makes lost civilizations more than entertainment. They are warnings about memory. Not only the memory of cities, but the memory of people. Closing cities don't vanish until they do. When you look at an ancient ruin, it's easy to feel superior, to think. They didn't know what we know, but the ruins are not proof of their weakness. They are proof that they existed at all. Because the real miracle is not that civilizations disappear. The miracle is that we can still find them. That a carved pillar can survive 10,000 years underground. That a sunken statue can rest in darkness until a diver's light touches its face. That a mountain can hide a city until a shovel breaks the surface and reveals geometry. Civilizations don't vanish all at once. They vanish when the world stops remembering them. And as you've seen across these 3 parts, ash can bury a city, sand can erase it, water can drown it, jungle can consume it. But the most powerful eraser is time. Because time doesn't destroy everything immediately. It simply waits for us to look away. And when we do, the map changes. Thanks for watching Lost Civilizations, Cities Erased from the Map. If you enjoyed this documentary series, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. Which lost city shocked you the most? Drop your answer in the comments.